Have you ever been so angry that you can barely see straight? That the way you're reacting, talking, you don't even recognize it? Today we're going to talk about anger. I am Nick, the Curious Patient, and this is the Be Well Now podcast with Dr. Ron Dummar.
Hello, everyone.
I told you about my problems with anger. One day I'm as calm as the Buddha, and then something sets me off, and I thought, wow, wouldn't this be great to discuss how to navigate when we get angry?
Yeah, that's being angry, and anger itself is a really interesting emotion. And more often than not, it gets a negative vibe, right? It gets the negative connotation. And so I thought I would start out by saying it's important to understand that anger has a role in your life. And if we can acknowledge that anger has a role, like you just said, then we can suggest to ourselves, maybe there's a proper way or a better way for me to utilize anger as opposed to just experiencing anger. And more often than not, I know in the situations where I've experienced anger in the past, you feel overwhelmed, you feel like out of control, and you feel in a sense of desperation, I think. And people often end up saying things or doing things that they regret. And I would call that anger out of control.
That's how it feels.
Mm-hmm.
Physiologically, I mean, you are a practitioner of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, and you're a chiropractor, and you're so much more than all these things. What is physiologically happening when we get angry? Because I start to numb out, and I don't even recognize the person that I become, and then I end up regretting some of the things that have happened.
Well, looking at it from a variety of different levels, understanding the emotion is something that Eastern philosophies and Eastern medicine has done a really good job at. Allopathy, Western medicine, we are scraping the surface of beginning to understand physiologically and biochemically, like what's occurring and what happens. But we do have a really good understanding of what is going to occur as a result of, if you blend these two, Western and Eastern, as a result of the organs that are disrupted when anger is experienced, what is going to occur physiologically from a Western allopathic understanding. So the organ that is most responsible or that is affected the most when anger is experienced is the liver. And if we look at this from a metabolic standpoint, when you consume food, whether it's meat or vegetables, whatever it is that you're consuming, your stomach breaks those foods down. It consumes and it should break those down into basic construct parts called amino acids. Your amino acids are the basic building blocks for proteins, for hormones, and for other necessary compounds for establishing health in the body. Well, the liver will take those amino acids and turn them into those hormones. It will create all of that beneficial compound soup, you could say, for you. Okay? Now, if you are in a state of anger and it's all over the place, or it's the out of control anger, I would say that there is a dysfunction, a significant dysfunction or even sluggishness occurring in the liver and gallbladder area. So if your liver becomes dysfunctional, then your hormone regulation is going to be dysfunctional. Your production of immunoglobulins is going to be deficient. Production of albumin, which is like a molecule that carries other proteins and compounds throughout the body, is going to be deficient. Bile is the production of bile, which helps to break down fats. Proper digestion of fats in the body is going to be disrupted. So there's a significant amount of, if you're experiencing anger over a period of time, there's a significant amount of physiological effects that your body is going to develop. So having said that, I think it's important for people to, because we kind of tipped out on this idea of what do you mean develop, right? So essentially I'm insinuating or suggesting that we carry some of these emotions over time. If we don't properly utilize them or process them, then we essentially store them and wait for them to rear their heads again.
So obviously there is a profound impact on the body and your physical health, not just as it's happening, but over time. And I don't mean to stop your explanation. Feel free to keep going if you'd like. I think
that was a perfect summary. Exactly.
I think that makes so much sense to me. Now, how do I deal with it in the moment? Because let's bring it back to that. I didn't even know any of the stuff you just said, so I'm going to process it all. But what do I do with that feeling of anger? Because I feel like it's a sense of righteousness, right? I am right, you are wrong. And if I'm humbly going to express this, I feel like I am right.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. You know, a big fight with somebody usually doesn't end well for either party. I'm not going to convince someone that they're wrong, but we're both going to get really, really, really agitated and frustrated and say things that we're not really happy about and don't really make us happy at the end.
Yeah, if you think of any major conflict from the beginning of time that you can imagine, it's generally rooted in someone's worldview, in the way they perceive the world, meaning what they think to be right or what they think to be wrong. And you can take that to any conflict in life. And people's worldview, or the way they expect things to be, or the way that they think things should be, is really the biggest issue that initiates conflict in any relationship. So why is this negotiation not playing out the way I expect? Usually it's because you're not prepared to concede anything from your worldview to make it a workable relationship. And as you are evaluating what you think you may have to change, you're negotiating with yourself about the capacity you have to change. So I've mentioned to some people, I grew up in a fairly religious family, and we would sing songs every morning, church songs, and then we would also read scriptures every single morning. And when I left the house and got married and entered into a new relationship with someone who was from a different family and had their way of expressing their commitment and devotion to deity or to their religion and faith, I had to recognize that my way was not necessarily the only way. The way that I had been taught was not the only way to express one's devotion to a practice of any sort, not just religiosity, but to any practice or to any commitment in life. Mine was not the only way. I began to realize that there are many ways of doing that. And we could say, and I'm jumping maybe a little bit off topic here, but when you look at a relationship, we know a lot of people really resonate with this idea that there are multiple love languages. There's more than one way to love somebody. Now, if I were to look at that, I would say, okay, well, if there's more than one way to love somebody, well, the ultimate would be to have the capacity to love somebody in all of those love languages. And not to only identify with one and say, well, this is my love language, so it's this or nothing. But to have compassion and understanding for where each person in the relationship is, with an acknowledgement that the objective for each of those individuals is to be able to have the capacity to receive and give love through all love languages. So if you take it that way, love, anger, now we're looking at anger and the meeting of needs through a negotiation. My objective is to be able to meet the needs of the individual, or to concede as necessary, or to be able to defend myself and the things that I think are important through all of the aspects of this negotiation, right? So I should be able to look at it and say, is this something I'm willing to let go of? Right? Is it necessary for the benefit of this relationship for me to let go of? Or is there something higher than myself holding me to this practice that if I change it, I'm going to be completely not even myself anymore?
I'm fascinated because when I get into a confrontation or a negotiation, I'm often dwelling on the other person and what they're doing right or wrong and how frustrated I am and why won't they change. And what you have been saying, this is actually a conversation with myself.
Mm-hmm.
And the stories that I create about how the world should be. I wonder if you could touch back on that, and that it's more about me than it is about them.
Yeah, absolutely. It is
I
entirely,
didn't think it was my problem. I thought it was them.
It's entirely about us. And the fascinating thing is that oftentimes what we see in them is a reflection of what's unresolved in us. What we see in them is something that is unresolved in us, meaning that we have something we're not ready to concede or let go of. And we hold on to it with such ferocity that it begins to rear its head in a dysfunctional communication pattern through a negotiation, right? Which creates friction. So we look at this person and we see that well, I can't believe that they're doing this. That's not right. I can't believe that they won't just concede this point. They won't concede anything. And even when we ask or want them to concede something, right, and we think that it's so obvious and we think we see the way so perfectly, they don't resonate with it at all. And that is a hard thing for us to acknowledge. How could they not resonate with that? Because I see it so perfectly and I know that this is the perfect way for things to be. Well, the reality is, to give you all some comfort, in truth, you're not wrong. Right? You're not wrong in saying it could work this way, because it could. The reality is there's an infinitesimal amount of ways that it could work. Any negotiation. It could end in so many different ways, right? It's not a set in stone path that you navigate each step knowing exactly where you're going to come out. You do have each step along the way. When you negotiate, you say, okay, well, I want this. Frequently people will say this, right? I want this to come of it, and so I'm going to fight for this. So when you go into that negotiation, you're fighting for this. But if you're not listening for what's happening in the communication and the needs of the other person, you're fighting for something that may not even be relevant to that negotiation. And if you let go of that temporarily, what you may find out is that it doesn't even matter to the other person, and that's all yours. But understanding the needs of the other individual is probably the bigger thing that you can do in a relationship to having a properly turned out negotiation. Is what is it you're looking for? What is it you're needing, right? And are we both willing to contribute, and are we both willing to concede? Because if you go into a negotiation and you're not willing to contribute and you're not willing to concede, then why are you at the table?
You mentioned negotiation. I think about that with a boss. I don't think of a negotiation when I think about something that gets highly charged emotionally.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's every interaction in life too, right? That you have. It's a negotiation of what choices I'm going to make, what decisions I'm going to make, and whether I think that this is right or wrong or they're right or wrong. Most people, when they're charged about a decision they just made, they have some sort of value judgment as to the other individuals in that experience. And something to understand about the liver that I think is really important, because I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't utilize these emotions of anger. I'm suggesting that we should properly identify, first of all, when we're charged, right? That's probably the first thing to do. Identify when we're charged early on, not long after we've been charged and suppressing it and suppressing it and suppressing it, and then finally we just can't control it anymore. But as early as possible, when you feel like, your integrity has been slighted, right, or challenged, or the value of the work that you're contributing or offering has been challenged, right? It's oftentimes anger comes from a slight to our contribution, and we feel like what we're contributing is a significant value. But when that's slighted and that's cut, and somebody doesn't seem to value that contribution, anger is usually the first thing to come, right?
Why are we so attached? So anger and resentment are a result. Why are we so attached to this feeling that our contributions matter? What's below that? What started earlier in our life that made us think that it was important to have our contributions recognized?
So as a child, as children, we have the, I would say, instinctual desire to contribute. We have the instinctual desire generally to goodness, even though as a child you're not walking around thinking good, right? But you are thinking play and fun and play and fun and play and fun, right? And how can I experience this? Oh, let's experience that. Let's experience that, right? And it is really focused on experience. It's experience heavy. And we are, I think, through our interactions with culture and society and growing up in families and having siblings, that's where we begin to really learn this nature of, we need to provide some level of value, right? Or regardless, we have a level of value. In some families, children are taught that they have no value. And that's a really sad situation too. It's another reason somebody could feel angry or carry anger throughout their life. And it's another reason somebody could, in that instance too, be seeking to prove their value for the rest of their life and then be angry when it's not recognized.
So at a core level, if broadly speaking, I feel like the world is, honestly, there's a lot of people in pain right now, and that's, I think, pretty well established. I mean, we have a mental health crisis that at a deep-rooted level, you may not think that you have value, and you're trying to prove that value through your contributions. And when somebody somehow in your mind says to you, in the way that you're interpreting it, your contributions don't have value, it goes right to the core of, I'm not valuable, I don't matter. And
I'm of no worth.
I'm of no worth. And that probably strikes a chord in somebody in a very raw way. And what do?
Well, typically we show the finger and walk away, or we lash out and yell back, right?
Why?
Out of defense. So the first thing to know about the liver is the liver in Eastern medicine is actually known as an organ that protects the cardiovascular system. It also protects the nervous system, the nerves. But it's known as a GAN organ, G-A-N, or a shield. So there's a shield aspect, a shielding aspect to the liver. So it's like a protective nature. And it's a hard shell. You could say it's a hard shell, but it's not meant to be impenetrable, because the liver also is action-oriented, not just protective-oriented. So from a protection standpoint, the liver will take heavy metals and chemicals and minerals that are overdone out of the blood and pull it out of the body and detoxify your body on a regular basis. So it's very protective to you, right? And it's constantly cleaning and purifying the blood and trying to make sure that that you have an appropriate balance of nutrients and minerals and other compounds, neurotransmitters and things in the body. Your liver is incredibly protective in that nature. It wants you to be at top form all the time. One thing that we can do, and I'm trying to get around to what we were just talking about, but one thing we can do with the liver is, if we want to improve the capacity of the liver to function in this way, is to move, right? Is to exercise. Is to be active. So sometimes through lack of activity, we can build up sluggishness in the liver itself, right? Or it gets overwhelmed by all of the work that it's got to do, and we're not properly detoxifying or cleansing chemicals and toxins out of the body. So then we can develop a greater sensitivity to feeling anger. This, in that case, would be more of a dysfunctional anger. If we're lashing out and it feels uncontrolled, that's a dysfunctional anger. And what we would want to do is to create a series of patterns in our life to be able to ensure as well as possible the health and stability of that liver organ. So when we're set in a situation, we already know, okay, I've prepared my liver as well as possible to defend myself, first of all, the shield, and then to act out, meaning to stand up for your integrity if it's challenged, but in a way that has respect for the other individual and understands their needs as well. So if I am uncontrolled, I might reply to somebody who's asking me to do something, F you, I've had enough, this is done, you don't respect me, bah, 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 and I'm out, right? Or I might reply, I need some time to think about this. I really think that's an interesting idea. I'll evaluate it. I can't say that I'm committed one way or another. Give me some time to think. Two very, very different approaches, but essentially accomplishing the same thing was kind of piss off. What if
you start with that calm demeanor and the person next to you is just highly charged emotionally and almost doesn't want to let you go, wants to make you feel what they feel, and they kind of, in your head, they keep baiting you, and then all of a sudden, this has happened to me, where I come in and I think that I'm going to stay calm, but then I feel slighted and attacked, and I feel the emotion, and it starts to build, and then I'm back in it with them.
Yeah, so this is a classic where you're with somebody for a long period of time or long periods of time, and this can be a really good friend, it can be a spouse, it can be a sibling, somebody that you basically have, siblings in the car, right? You're not getting out of the car, figure it out, And I find myself saying that to my kids sometimes too, like, hey, you guys need to figure this out, right? Like, obviously this is not going the way either of you want, so let's see if we can create some sort of semblance of peace, right? So you're sitting next to somebody, or you're with somebody on a very continual basis, and you feel like your integrity continues to be challenged. You feel like your integrity is continually challenged. What do we do? Is that what I hear you asking?
Yeah, and someone who knows you well enough.
They know you so well.
So well.
They know exactly where to strike.
So even a calm demeanor, to them, there's something else in you that you've expressed before that they see as the problem.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to let you get away with this one.
Yeah.
I need to make you feel the way I feel.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that's a discussion of, and really it's a discussion of, are we committed in this relationship together? Right? Because if there is one party that is more just focused on the gotcha, then the end product, that's a problem. Both parties need to be focused on what we can create more harmoniously together in the future that is likely something that neither of us are going to fully understand right now, but something that together we can get to. That is the purpose and role of a relationship. Synergism, right? It's we bring one and one together and it becomes 11, not 2. People have said that a lot and utilized that idea. But it's this idea that when we bring groups, teams together, we want them to function in a harmonious way. If there's any sort of discord among that team or that group, it really drags like a cancer the entire group down. And so we have to find the points of tension in each of those groups and resolve them. Generally, somebody is feeling like they're not getting, a need is not being fulfilled. A need is not being met. And so they're kind of reaching out saying, well, you're doing this. And oftentimes a person is not feeling fulfilled in what they're doing, what their role is, or what their recognition is. And this comes back down to some of those love languages, right? So we've talked about anger, but it's hard to talk about anger without also talking about love.
I'm thinking about somebody that I'm in a conflict with, and the clarity with which you just expressed that, they don't feel fulfilled. But if it's a coworker or a business partner, maybe if it's a spouse, their love language, but it's not in that time to be like, and by the way, Adam, what are your love languages so that I may better fight with you right now or negotiate with you? Because they are unfulfilled. That's a perfect way of putting it. How do you get them
They're missing
fulfilled?
something, right? So the detection criteria needs to be for a leader or for a supervisor or whatever your role is in that case, to be focused on two things. There's two results here. One, we can resolve this issue pretty easily and meet the need that is not being met. Or two, he needs to find a new environment. Those are the two options. But discord and disharmony is not an option. That's what we have to recognize. So with that focus, we go into this discussion to find out. Generally, that question would first be with somebody, hey, how you doing? What's going on? Are you feeling like the contribution you're making is being recognized? What do you feel like the contribution you're making is? Where do you feel your skills are being utilized? And do you feel like you have skills that are not being utilized, that you could contribute better? And usually just by asking some of those simple, basic questions, you'll get down to, yeah, you know what? I'm not. I don't feel included on this team. That's usually where it starts superficially. I feel like, I'm an outcast, or I feel like maybe I just don't fit in, right? It's not necessarily that you don't fit in. It's usually that you're not fitting in, right? So let's find the place where your skill set and the contribution that you're making, all of the things that you're contributing, that you say and feel like you're contributing, are meeting with the contribution that is requisite for the job description. And if we can have those meet in the middle, right, then we're good. Everything crosses over, and then all of a sudden he's fulfilled. He gets the recognition in his job that he needs, and the team is feeling better about it because they think now that he's contributing. Sometimes people are making contributions and the team doesn't recognize it because they're feeling like that person should be doing something else.
What do you do with
to
that?
Contribute, right? So the question here is, what is that person's role? Is it well defined, right? Or is it understood even by the team? And in a lot of teams, when you put things together, people love job descriptions. Some people love job descriptions because it allows them to do less. And some people actually hate job descriptions because it creates too many restrictions or boundaries for their creativity. And learning what type of individual you're dealing with, is this a limitless expression type of individual that wants to, explore all the boundaries and go beyond and really have the autonomy and freedom to be able to try something over here and then try this and then move in this direction? Or is it somebody who needs more confined and focus in order to really be productive? In a marriage relationship, you can also see that being the case, where oftentimes you have a very creative one, and then you have a very focused and centered one. And sometimes people may inappropriately classify the creative one as being, flighty or a little bit, ditzy or whatever. But the reality is that's not true. It's just their intelligence is being utilized in a very focused way that contributes to that relationship in a fantastic way if it's recognized, right? I went up and visited a patient who recently had a baby. I was assessing the baby, and I was talking to the mom, and they have a beautiful home that was just recently finished, and it's up in a serene spot, a mountainous region, just a little area where it flattens out a little bit. Very, very picturesque, very, very nice, beautiful place. And she's got this very kind of modern, chic-looking home. Very, very nice, very well designed. And I was talking to her about it. I just said, she had an indoor plastered, it was made to look cement, but it was just plastered over drywall. She told me that, but it looked cement, and I'm like, that is a really nice feature, nice piece, and everything just seemed put together so well and so nice. Not like, everything's so clean and orderly in here, but it was just designed really well. You could see it, you could feel it. And as I talked to the mother more, I learned that she designed the home. She does some drafting and design and started doing that early on in high school. And this was a significant contribution that she was able to make in this relationship as well. But what a incredibly peaceful space that she was able to create for that family through her creative outlet as well. And the thought that went into it, the focus, the intelligence, that all just centered around creating this space where someone that came in, who maybe was a more left-brained as well and focused, could have a space to feel orderly and to feel like, okay, I can get stuff done and get projects finished and completed. But then also places in the home where expression was allowed freely, right? Almost encouraged by the design of the home. So looking at something like that, we can't just look at someone's contribution or their skill set and say, well, it's not a value to our team. It's just not being utilized in the way that it would be properly contributing to the team. So the role of a leader is to recognize, okay, what are our goals and objectives? What are our endpoints? What are we attempting to get to, right? Or what goalposts are we wanting to push through in order to get to higher and better things? And how can these individuals, with their skill sets and with their emotions and with their backgrounds and with their understanding, right, their gifts, talents, get us towards those things? Well, that requires of a leader to know someone. And that, I would say, is the number one, kind of circling back a little bit, the number one thing in a negotiation is to understand the needs of the other person. Really do everything you can to, what is it that they're saying? What is it they're asking me for? What is it they're saying they're not getting? And can I actually verbally repeat that back to them? It sounds to me like you're saying you need more of this. It sounds to me like you're saying you're not getting this. It sounds to me like you're saying you need me to do this. So those phrases are more focused in understanding the individual, more focused in saying, okay, I'm just as much in this relationship as you are. We both have areas that we need to improve on, because everybody does. And if you're in a relationship with somebody who doesn't have anything to improve on, you might not be in that relationship very long, because there will come a point, right, where if there isn't negotiation, there isn't change, there isn't adaptation, along the lines of, hey, we're progressing together. If you're going to progress through those goalposts as a team together, you're going to change. The very mere fact that the ball is not any longer on the 20-yard line, but it's through the goalposts, it elicits a level of change. So to think that things can be the same now as they are, or that they'll be the same, later as they are now, is folly. It's complete folly in any relationship, business, team, marriage relationship, or otherwise. So my first instruction for somebody who's saying, how do I deal with anger and how do I address some of these issues that I'm dealing with as a team, is to say, recognize that things are always going to be a little different moving forward. And recognize that we should all have a capacity to change and adapt.
Make friends with change.
Yeah.
If you're already in the middle of the storm, what do you do? I've heard Ram Dass talk about these little mala beads, and he had a little mantra, Ram, which I assume is God in Sanskrit, or I'm not quite sure, but you just keep fingering each bead and say Ram or whatever your mantra is. He said that was very helpful for him when you're in the middle of anger, no love languages, no understanding of the person, you're blind. What do I do in that situation?
Okay.
Because for me, if I step away and maybe meditate, that's helpful. But I guess extricating myself from it and dealing with it in the aftermath. It's one of these where I've already botched the whole operation. Yeah. We're in the middle of this. It's just a lot of pain and back and forth, and we're not listening to each other, and nothing's getting resolved.
Yeah, it's literally the creation of the storm. Yeah. The creation of the storm is that's the picture of life, isn't it, right? We all have to go through a recognition phase of, I don't like this. Or maybe some people do like that. Is that a space that you feel really comfortable in? Some people may say that some attorneys feel really comfortable in that space, right?
If you grew up in a conflict-ridden home, you may feel most comfortable in the chaos. Mm-hmm. But that's your own work to do. Probably need to talk to a therapist about that one.
That is work, right?
The magnifying glass into what you need to work on.
Yeah, it's a recognition too of what am I trying to create, what do I want, and how do I get there? And when you're in the middle of the storm, I would say the creation of what you want starts long before the storm occurs. And we've talked about the storm. There's a classic story that people know from biblical texts, and it is one about a storm. But the reality is there's a storm all about you all the time. And you can jump into that storm and be a part of the chaos and responsive to it, just responding, or you can be an actor and choose the actions, choose your own actions, regardless of the storm. You interpret, you look around, you evaluate. Can you be internal? Can you still say, what's going on here? Observational, and then make an assessment, and then act. So the biblical story people know of is when there was a storm upon the Sea of Galilee, right? And then Jesus, he was sleeping during this storm, and his apostles had to wake him up. They were fearful, they say, that they were about to die in this storm. And these are people who lived their entire lives on the sea. They made their living on the sea. So they were not uncommon or unaccustomed to storms. They were very well aware of storms and the threat, and had experienced many before, but this one they were concerned would take their lives. It was that significant and severe. And during this severe and significant storm, somebody had the audacity and potentially the capacity to sleep. Okay? That's our role. That's our objective, is to be able to be in the storm but have the capacity to sleep. Not sleep as in you're not aware of anything that's going on. I think the analogy here really is that he had the capacity to sleep, meaning that he was able to be still enough inside and internally that the outward problems that were occurring in the storm was not going to affect his rest. How many of us stay awake at night, fretting and worrying, insomnia? We wake up in the middle of the night between 1 and 3 in the morning sometimes, and we're in a sweat, or we can't figure out why we woke up, but we can't go back to sleep. These are anxiety-related issues that is also related to the liver organ. There's a liver dysfunction there, okay? So we need to be able to have the capacity to get the rest we need so our body can fulfill the functions it's supposed to function, it's supposed to do as well. So if we can get that rest, if we can achieve that peace, not just at night when we're meant to sleep, but throughout the day, we can allow our organs and our body and our heart, our liver, our nervous system to be in a state of rest and recovery, then we're going to be able to perpetuate into our environment around us a state of peace and calm as well. We'll be able to properly negotiate with the storm and bring about some level of peace into that storm. So the story goes, essentially he stood up, they woke him up. You think we're going to die here, and here you're sleeping. So he wakes up, he looks around, he goes, okay. And then he commands the storm to be at peace. And then the calm returns. Okay?
Being able to create a place of peace around you into your orbit, having a sense of restfulness while you're going throughout your day. It all sounds fascinating. I think it's a topic for another podcast on how we achieve it. But I think in layman's terms, we all know if we didn't get a lot of rest or sleep, we can be cranky as hell, and we maybe say things we didn't want to say because we were so dang tired.
Absolutely.
So get your sleep.
Absolutely. Irritable, frustrated, angry, upset. So
I think getting the proper amount of rest and feeling rested throughout the day, proper nutrition, so many other topics we're going to explore in the Be Well Now podcast, focusing on being well, living in the present. And if you have questions or if you want us to dwell on some other issues, if you want us to explore other issues, we can be reached at bewellnowpodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's bewellnowpodcast@gmail.com. And as often happens, Dr. Ron Dummar's phone is off the hook. He's a busy man. He's the Heber healer, and he's got some work to do. Dr. Dummar, thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much. It was fun.